Good afternoon. Welcome to the Connected Table Live on W4CY Radio. I am your host, Melanie Young, with my co-host, David Ransom. Each week we bring you the dynamic people in the world of eating and drinking. And today we're going to start with spirited women. A lot of women working in the spirits business, and we are delighted to have two delightful ones who are really smart and doing amazing things with us today. Our first is Elizabeth Asher. We're going to call her Lizzie. She is president of Macchu Pisco. With her sister Melanie, like me, they share the love for Peru's national drink. And she is doing a lot to bring knowledge about Pisco and Macchu Pisco to the United States. Lizzie is a lawyer by training, and she directs all the marketing and importing of Macchu Pisco and its sister brands, La Diablada and Nuestro Pisco. And Melanie oversees production in Peru. Together, they have achieved a 30% growth since founding the company in 2004. Really amazing. Their Pisco is an unaged 80-proof clear spirit, but I'm going to let Lizzie talk about that and her incredible work, not only in educating people about Pisco, but also her efforts with Melanie in supporting women's rights and the farmers in Peru. Welcome.
Well, thank you for having me, Melanie, and lovely to be here chatting about great women and great things we love, like food and spirits.
Well,
absolutely.
We're certainly happy to have you on the show, and we've known each other for a long time now, I think, and it's nice to finally put the piece together where we can actually talk live about Macchu Pisco and the road that got you there to creating it and marketing it here in the U.S.
Tell us about it. Tell our listeners about Pisco. What is it and its tradition as a spirit in Peru and how important it is to Peru?
Well, Pisco is important to Peru because I think it's our liquid soul, really. That's how I would put it. But for those who don't know what Pisco is, basically I like to describe it as just a white spirit made from grapes. And that can sound overly simplistic. But I like to start that as a starting point so that people know how versatile it is and how much they can do with it once they discover it. But the great thing about Pisco is its very rich history and deep roots within our country and really the history of this entire hemisphere, because Pisco is actually the first distilled spirit of the Americas. And it was there is actually a written historical record that dates back to 1613 that attests to the production of Pisco in Peru. So we are very proud of that. Everybody always talks about the rum from Caribbean, but little do people know that actually before rum was the preferred choice of sailors, actually Pisco was what kept those sails floating and kept everyone merry on those ships on those long voyages.
And particularly on the west coast of the Americas as well, because there was no Panama Canal. People really weren't going down around the Horn at that point very often.
Right.
So Pisco was a spirit that they could get from the port in Peru, and then it traveled up and down the coast of the west side of the Americas, both down to Chile and then also up to places like San Francisco, which were just starting to really emerge as places where people lived and obviously then wanted to have something to drink.
Yeah, that's exactly right, David. Actually, that's the perfect, I think, historical context to that. What very few people know about is that the port of Pisco in Peru actually used to be the largest port in South America. So inevitably, every ship doing trade up, all the way up north, up to San Francisco, always had to stop in the port of Pisco to load up, to refill their commissaries, if you will.
Right, of course, and obviously became very popular all over the west coast of both North and South and Central America for that reason. Tell us a little bit about really just what Pisco is. I know it's really a very unique product in so many ways because there's a lot of regulations about how you have to make it, a lot of regulations as to how you can release it, et cetera. It is a brandy. For the most part, it is distilled from grapes, so it's obviously a distilled white spirit made from grapes, which classifies it as a brandy. But it's really much more than that, and it's also got regulations, unlike brandies and vodkas and gins and things like that, in that it can only be distilled once if I'm correct. And there's many, many things that need to go into it to make it actually Pisco. Can you tell us a little bit about the history and the kind of the regulations involved in that?
Sure, and you are right, actually. Many of those laws and regulations that the Peruvian government has instituted have been put in place in order to protect our denomination of origin,
sure,
and to really distinguish the products that Peru makes and calls Pisco, as opposed to what we refer to as the aguardiente that Chile makes, and tries to label as Pisco, and might be Pisco in their eyes. But as I always like to point out, there is a reason why, other than the U.S., Chile is the largest importer in the world of Peruvian Pisco. So.
Interesting. Wow.
I love that.
Yeah, I always say that. If your Pisco is so good, why are you buying so much of ours? Which I say it's undeniable because it's the real deal.
Well, that kind of just nails the coffin right there, doesn't it?
Melanie did say I was a lawyer, so I like to keep my facts straight.
Well,
absolutely.
It's funny. I remember at Tales of the Cocktail, the great spirits industry convention down in New Orleans every year. A couple of years ago, there was a Pisco Wars seminar, which was a lot of fun. I don't know if you attended it, but I did. And it was just a big back and forth about who had actually created Pisco. And the Chilean side got up on one side and bantered away and showed maps and charts and graphs and things like that. And then the Peruvians came along and did their thing on the other side. And in the end, it became a draw. But I think it kind of erred on the side of Peru, personally.
Oh, well, I'm very happy that for the erudite people who keep their ears open, they know the real home of Pisco. So that's what matters to me.
Well, Melanie, you had something to say.
Well, yeah, something that I didn't know about Pisco, which I think is interesting in the world of spirits, is you say, Lizzie, that true Pisco does not give you a headache or a hangover. Why is that?
Well, okay. So, and actually, this is a great connection to David's previous question. So it really brings us back to all these laws and regulations for production. And really, there are a long set of rules that distillers must abide by in order to produce what the government deems worthy of the label of Pisco. And that entails several things. Like David said, well, actually, David, Macchu Pisco, we distill once, but in Peru, you can distill twice.
Oh, you can?
You can.
I thought it was just once, so sorry about that. Yeah.
But you can distill, but the idea is that you distill to proof. And the idea for that is that essentially we don't use water to really reach our ABV. And there are rules such as we're not allowed to add any sugars or anything that is going to interfere with the taste of the grape. So basically that means any sugars or any flavorings. I mean, the whole boom that has happened within the vodka category of all these flavored vodkas. Those are all synthetic products. And yes, they're called quote unquote natural. But we now know that the label natural is not really what we all optimally would really want it to mean. And so, Melanie, going back to your question about how really my sister Melanie, who is our distiller, and I always, say, you can pour, make your night a Macchu Pisco night and be fine the next day because, well, number one, we've done it and we're here to tell it. But because our product is so pure and so many of the impurities that are left over and part of the production in other spirits are really what causes a lot of the hangovers. And it's really the toxins that your body has to process that leads to that. Whereas Pisco tends to be just a very clean spirit. And I will shy away from using the word natural since I just blasted those vodka. Yeah, the vodka brands are labeling themselves,
So really it's by working with a quality product that goes into the still, you're going to get a quality product that comes out of the still. And there's really, a lot of people think that when they look at a bottle of vodka and it says distilled 5 times, 6 times, there's one that says it's distilled 37 times. that's not necessarily a better vodka. It's just a vodka that's been A, filtered more, and then B, it also gets stripped of a lot of its flavor, and so it becomes a very neutral spirit in that way. With Pisco, you're not really trying to make it a neutral spirit. You're trying to create what the grape had in it to begin with in a distilled spirit. So you don't want to strip away by filtering and distilling more than one time or two times what it came with to begin with. So, you have to start with a better quality product, right?
Yeah, and actually, you're exactly right. I think you pretty much nailed it. In terms of when I say to people, oh, Pisco is a spirit made from grapes, they always think, oh, grappa. And I always say, okay, well, at least you're in the right zone, but not really.
You got the right fruit.
Because for Peruvian Pisco, by law, we actually only have one production window a year, and I always tell people this is extremely important because the grape harvest makes or breaks our Pisco year. Right. So you really have to think of us like vintners, Exactly, Melanie.
So what kind of grapes are they? I mean, is there a name? Is it called Pisco grape or a different kind of grape?
Actually, there are 8 different varieties of grapes which are designated as Pisco grapes. So you may only use one of these 8 grapes if you want to produce Pisco. And those 8 grapes are subdivided into aromatic and non-aromatic categories. And so going back to this whole idea of this regulatory system that exists to preserve the identity of our Pisco, really it is all driven to ensure that the final bottle really captures the essence of the grape that the distiller worked with. So that means things such as, you begin with your raw material as, the grape on a vine, and all the way down to post-distillation during your resting period. We can only rest in neutral containers, whether that would be glass, stainless steel, or plastic. But Pisco, Peruvian Pisco, can never touch wood. We can never be rested in a barrel, and that is a massive point of distinction. With many other products around the world, and in particularly with the aguardiente that comes out of Chile, because many of those Piscos sometimes are slightly rested in wood, but Peruvians consider that cheating, because if your product was very exceptional and very good quality, you wouldn't have to correct with a little bit of, the wood flavor, imparting of that wood flavor into the wood and the grape.
And they become very different products. I've had some of those aged Piscos that come out of Chile, and they are vastly different than not a raw, but an unaged Pisco. It really becomes a different spirit altogether.
Interesting.
It's got color. The floral notes are gone. That flavor of the grape, especially if you're using something like Muscat, which is one of the grapes that they use. It becomes a very different product after that.
Yeah, exactly. And it's very interesting because I have had the great fortune of going to work the market in France, and we have a great distribution there. And Macchu Pisco and La Diablada have really been embraced there. And part of the reason is that actually people think of our Piscos as aged cognacs. And that is particularly true of our La Diablada brand, which I always like to say is my sister's baby and my mother's first grandchild. Because La Diablada actually contains, the final product contains almost 20 pounds of grape per bottle. Which exceeds what the cognac requirement is. Yes, absolutely.
Very interesting.
So what actually differentiates the two labels that you have, which are Macchu Pisco and La Diablada? What actually makes those two different from each other?
Well, that's another great question, because that brings up something very important within the Pisco category. In Peru, we have 3 different styles in which Piscos can be made. Piscos can be single grape varietal Piscos, which we call puros. Piscos can be blends, which we call acholados.
Acholado,
And yep. And then we have piscos that can be mosto verdes, which there's yet to be a translation in English for that, so we stick with mosto verde. But those are the three different styles. So Macchu Pisco represents the puro, the single grape style, and it only contains the quebranta grape in it.
Okay.
And then La Diablada is our blend of 4 different grapes.
So that's the acholado.
Correct, exactly.
Yeah. And quebranta really is the grape that is most widely used in pisco production, correct?
Yeah, it is actually very much our go-to pisco grape. It is our workhorse, as we like to say.
Yeah.
Does it
go ahead.
Sorry. No, please, you go.
No, and a lot of the reason for that is how beautifully and versatile it comes through in a wide range of cocktails. And in particular, it is really a grape that represents Peru because the quebranta grape only exists within our boundaries.
Right.
So
and it is, well, not quite indigenous actually. It is in a way, a offshoot of the first grape that the Spaniards brought over to the Americas. When they first came to the New World. So what most people don't know is that the first viticulture center in the Americas was actually in Peru. And
I actually did not know that.
I didn't know that either.
Yeah.
It was the first vines that they brought to Peru, and they first tried planting those vines around Machu Picchu because when they went to Cusco, they noticed that the Incas farmed in terraces. So it reminded them of how their grapes grew. However, Machu Picchu is at a very high altitude, so it wasn't really conducive for planting those vines there. But a pre-Incan civilization had developed aqueducts in the Pisco Valley, and they transplanted those vines there, where these aqueducts were fed by waters that melted from the glacier in the Andes. And the word quebrar means to break in Spanish. And so as this black grape from the south of Spain was broken into its new terroir of this desert environment, it became the quebranta grape.
Yeah.
Interesting. Wow, I had no idea.
Well, it makes a beautiful pisco, I will say that. I've actually had the good fortune to be able to try a lot of the varietal bottlings, not just from you, but from other producers as well, of the grapes that producers make pisco out of in Peru, and I love the quebranta version. It's just got such a great clean taste to it, and it's got such beautiful notes in the nose and in the palate. I really love it. Muscatel is another one that I love as well, but I've had things from Muscat from all over the world, but the quebranta really is so unique, and it really makes me it's what I think of as pisco when I have it.
Yeah, and you know what, actually, that is pretty much why my sister decided to create Macchu Pisco as really our brand that we think defines the Pisco drinking experience. Because if you were to travel through Peru and come back to the U.S., you most likely will have drank a puro de quebranta.
Right.
And so we wanted to make sure that there was a brand here in the U.S. that represented the true drinking Peruvian experience.
Well, let's talk
about
drinking it. Let's talk about drinking it.
Let's talk about drinking it because
Can you tell we're not in the same room?
Here's my synopsis. Pisco's been around for 400 years. It's a well-known spirit. It's been in everybody's liquor cabinet for generations now. But in the last 5 years or so, Pisco, particularly Peruvian Pisco, of course, has really just taken off within the cocktail set, the mixology set.
Yep.
People are just starting to drink it all over again. What do you see was the impetus for that? How did that come about? And it's a boon for everybody, I think, because Pisco is such a beautiful spirit. But I love the fact that it's come back so much and so fast and so well. Tell us about what your take on that.
Well, I think that two things have happened, actually. There has been a true renaissance of really in the drinking bartending world that has really helped unearth spirits that had once been lost. Because you have to remember, Pisco had a very rich history in the U.S. prior to Prohibition in San Francisco during the era of the Gold Rush. And really, a forgotten classic is the Pisco Punch.
Right.
So we definitely have roots of cocktailing within the American scene. And so I think during this Renaissance period that we're seeing, that it has gone beyond just the original beautiful, gorgeous speakeasies that to this day I think define and continue to push boundaries and open new paths of the way we think about drinking and cocktailing, places like PDT and Death and Company. Those were bars that really started searching for the history of cocktailing and became aware of Pisco and what it was about.
Sure.
And then I think at the same time, fortunately, people, regular customers, are becoming more aware of where do their foods come from, really the genesis, where is it grown, and they want to hear the history. And people want to be tied more to what they're consuming. And as I said, Pisco has this really rich history that lends itself not only to be drank in an incredibly delicious manner, but also, as I always say, you can actually drink and get an education at the same time. So it always makes for very fun evenings wherever I am. And the great thing has also been that we've had some really good quality products come into the country, and I think that's allowed for a lot of discovery to happen, and will continue to happen because the Pisco category can be as rich in its diversity as certainly wine can be.
Well, it certainly can. I mean, and there's so many great brands, yours of course included, that are coming through into the U.S. now. Do you think that the market is becoming diluted at all?
Oh my gosh, not in the least.
No, good. I'm glad you say that.
Good.
No. Actually, it's funny because in Peru, I'm most often asked, who do I consider my competitor? And I always say, my competitor will be the person that I would like to squash most will be if and when there ever enters into this market a Pisco that I consider a poor quality product.
Right.
Because that is not something that the Pisco category that's just being discovered needs. As I always like to say to people, my sister has incredibly gifted palate. We have won every award there is to be won, Ultimate Spirits Challenge, Ultimate, Cocktail Challenge, the Beverage Testing Institute, the San Francisco Cocktail Competition, everything we've won. And that's great, and I'm so excited and proud for us. But just because there is, this incredible, two brands here, it doesn't mean you can't continue to broaden your spectrum, because our La Diablada, our Acholado, is my sister's blend of 4 grapes. And there could be other Acholados out there that are made from different grapes that you have yet to discover. Wow. And the really amazing thing, where the Pisco category hasn't even scratched the surface in the U.S., is that there are 5 different regions in Peru where Pisco grapes can be grown. So there is a difference in terroir within our Peruvian homeland of grapes that have yet to make it here. So, we're just scratching the surface, really.
Well, that's good to know. I have one question, and then we're going to have
a final question.
We're going to have to wrap up. But to that end, do you find that is there a possibility at this point that Pisco production is reaching a kind of a maximized limit, like they are in Jalisco with tequila? There's so many producers that are going there and wanting to make product that they're running out of room. Is that happening in Peru at all yet, or is there still a long way to go?
That's actually a really great question. I don't think so much the problem will be the number of people coming down to Peru trying to make it. I think that the pressures that we are getting is that some of the lands that are devoted for Pisco grape productions. As I said, remember, not every grape qualifies to be a Pisco grape.
Right.
But for Pisco grape production, is being encroached upon because there are other agricultural needs in the country. So one thing that people forget about is that Pisco is made from grapes. It is by far the most expensive and difficult raw material from which to work with, which is why wines covet, such high prices.
Well,
and what is happening? Yeah, I mean, we all certainly know.
My family owned a winery. I can certainly agree with you on that.
Yeah. So actually, what is going to be a challenge for us in the future is the potential of actually being able to continue to have top quality grapes and the amount of grapes to produce the liters needed, just simply because we are a booming country and there are other agricultural products that also grow alongside of the grapes, such as asparagus and artichokes.
Right.
So those exports are booming as well, and you've got to imagine, people have to farm land and make the best living that they can. And here we are saying, no, please, you make great grapes. You can't, you
can't make something that's easier to grow.
Yeah, exactly. I know. But, it is a difficult conversation, which is why we work so closely with all the co-op of farmers that we work with and all the women that support us. And we are very in tune with working with nonprofits in the area to make sure that as much as possible people are profiting from the same success that Macchu Pisco and Maria Blada are having here in the U.S., that we are able to give back and bring back to Chincha, which is the village where we have our distillery in Peru.
Right.
That's terrific. That the humanitarian part of your story was just only touched on, but it's very, very admirable, Lizzie. So thank you to you and your sister Melanie.